Welcome to the Deep Dive. I'm so glad you're joining us today because we're getting into something that is equal parts mesmerizing and, well, honestly, terrifying.
Oh, absolutely terrifying.
Right. So picture a sunset. You are looking out over a wide open field, and suddenly the sky fills with this massive shifting dark cloud. But it isn't weather. It's thousands of starlings, a bird murmuration.
It's just a powerful image.
They are swooping, diving, expanding, and contracting in this perfect, fluid synchronization. And it's undeniably beautiful to watch. But what if you took that exact same principle, 1,000 tiny coordinated elements acting as one massive, undeniable force, and you applied it to a cyber attack?
That is exactly the premise of what we're looking at today.
Right. That is the core of the document we are unpacking today. It's a briefing, and it's titled, "It's Not Just Bees That Swarm: How to Protect Distributed Infrastructure from Coordinated Disruption."
It's a phenomenal read.
It really is. And our mission today is to figure out how these attacks work and, more importantly, to extract the exact playbook for surviving them. Because whether you are, a director managing a massive corporate supply chain, an entrepreneur relying on a dozen different cloud platforms, or honestly, just living in our modern connected world, everything you do relies on distributed systems.
Everything, from your banking to your groceries.
Exactly. So understanding how those systems break is the ultimate key to truly understanding how they work.
And that murmuration image is just, well, it's a fantastic anchor for this conversation.
Okay.
Because we have been conditioned to think of threats as these singular, massive strikes against a primary target.
Right, the big dramatic explosion.
Yeah, exactly. But the source material we're looking at is warning us that the next era of infrastructure disruption does not look like a sledgehammer. It looks like a swarm.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because when we talk about a cyber attack, I think most of us immediately default to the classic Hollywood scenario, right?
Oh, 100%. The hacker in the basement.
Yes. There's a dark room, a single genius hacker in a hoodie typing furiously at a keyboard, and they hit enter to launch one catastrophic silver bullet virus against a single massive target.
It's the Death Star exhaust port, basically.
Exactly, the one tiny flaw that blows up the whole thing.
Yeah.
But this briefing argues that entire paradigm is dead.
It really is. I mean, the Hollywood trope relies on a centralized world that simply does not exist anymore. If we look at the architecture of modern organizations, we don't just have one big mainframe sitting in a basement guarded by a firewall.
Right, it's not the 1990s anymore.
No, not at all. The reality is that modern operations are sprawling. I mean, we have systems spread out across multiple cloud regions, right? We rely on dozens of third-party suppliers just to, I don't know, process payroll or host a website.
Yeah.
Plus, we have remote teams logging in from coffee shops all over the world, and we have physical equipment spread out globally.
Which is great for efficiency, right?
Right.
I mean, gets things done quickly.
Oh, it brings incredible flexibility, absolutely. But the trade-off is that it creates an almost infinite number of new weak points. And a swarm attack exploits this exact modern architecture.
Because they're not looking for the Death Star exhaust port anymore.
Exactly. Instead of looking for one master key, the attackers launch a coordinated campaign of low-cost, low-level actions aimed at multiple weak points at the exact same time.
So what does that actually look like in practice?
Well, we are talking about maybe a slight service slowdown on a secondary application over here, and then a little bit of stolen identity abuse over there, a minor third-party supplier issue, maybe some local equipment interference.
Just tiny little things.
Right. On their own, any one of these anomalies just looks like a standard Tuesday for a busy IT team.
It just looks like background noise.
Mm-hmm.
A glitchy router, a user who forgot their password, nothing worth sounding the major alarm over.
And that is the genius of the swarm. The danger isn't the brilliance or, the sophistication of any single tactic. It's the combined effect of the timing, the scale, and the coordination.
Ah, so it's the volume.
Yes. They overwhelm the defenders with simultaneous volume across different domains. They aren't trying to blow open the vault door. They are picking 50 different side windows at the exact same moment.
Okay, wait, I need to push back on this a little bit.
Sure.
Because isn't a highly distributed system supposed to be more resilient?
Yeah.
I mean, I thought that was the whole point of moving everything to the cloud and decentralizing. So if one server goes down, or I don't know, one office loses power, the rest of the network just routes around the damage and keeps running.
That is a highly logical assumption. And it is exactly the mindset that leaves massive organizations so vulnerable today.
Really? because that's what we've all been taught for the last 10
I
years.
know, I know. You are absolutely right that distribution brings fault tolerance against an isolated accident. Like, if a construction crew accidentally cuts a fiber optic cable in one city, your cloud redundancy saves you.
Right, the traffic reroutes, the business survives.
Exactly. But here's the critical distinction. That same distributed architecture provides a massively broader surface area for a coordinated intentional attack.
Oh, I see. Because the attacker knows about all those different nodes,
Yeah.
and they hit enough of them that the redundancy itself just fails.
You've got it. That brings us to a fundamental paradigm shift that leadership really has to embrace here. The source emphasizes that leaders have to stop asking only, can we stop an attack from happening?
Says you can't.
Right. They must start asking, can our essential services keep running if several parts of the organization are disrupted at once?
Wow.
This moves the entire conversation away from pure cybersecurity, which, focuses on keeping the bad guys out and into the realm of holistic business resilience, which focuses on survivability.
Because you literally cannot build a wall high enough or long enough to protect 1,000 different small interconnected targets.
It's mathematically impossible. Defenders have to protect all those remote sites, cloud instances, and suppliers to a perfectly acceptable standard everywhere, all the time.
Which takes a massive budget.
Right. And attackers, on the other hand, well, they only need a modest amount of access. Some cheap automated scripts or maybe a handful of compromised passwords. And boom, they create chaos across several of them simultaneously. Low-cost disruption becomes a very high-cost problem for the defender.
Which brings us to arguably the most alarming part of this briefing. Because when we say attackers are targeting multiple parts of the organization, we aren't just talking about different software programs.
Yeah, we are definitely not.
We are talking about the physical world.
Yeah.
The briefing highlights that the single biggest blind spot for defenders is the local physical environment.
Bridging that gap between the screen and the real world is where the swarm attack becomes uniquely devastating. You see, attackers know that IT departments and physical security teams operate in completely different silos.
They don't talk to each other.
Rarely. They have different budgets, different management, entirely different cultures. So while an attacker is launching digital attacks, let's say a distributed denial of service attack, or a DDoS, where they flood your main server with so much fake automated traffic that it crashes.
Right, a classic digital attack.
Exactly. But simultaneously, they're deploying low-level interference against your physical assets.
And the briefing gives some wild examples of this. We're talking about tampering with telecom cabinets out on the street, using radio jammers to interfere with base stations.
Yes, or pointing lasers at security cameras to blind them.
Which sounds like something out of an Ocean's 11 movie, but it's real.
Yeah.
Or even electronically locking the access control systems at physical vehicle depots.
Imagine the diagnostic nightmare this creates for the people trying to actually fix the problem.
Seriously, so it's like someone slashing the tires of the IT team's repair van while simultaneously DDoSing the main server.
Yeah.
There is a massive digital fire destroying your network, but you physically cannot get a human being out of the parking lot and over to the data center to manually reboot the system.
That is a perfect analogy. You are neutralizing the human response while attacking the digital asset. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, you really start to understand the true motives behind a swarm attack.
Because it's not just about money.
No. We have to stop viewing these events strictly through the lens of traditional ransomware where, the goal is just a quick financial payout.
Right. The briefing explicitly states these campaigns are often designed for something much broader and much more damaging.
Yeah, these attacks are designed to exhaust the defenders and create a pervasive sense of helplessness. I mean, if you keep getting hit with a dozen minor blended physical and digital issues every single day, your engineering teams burn out.
They get exhausted, they make mistakes.
Exactly. Beyond that, these attacks are often designed to create political pressure and shatter public trust. Think about the implications of a single outage at a hospital or a regional logistics hub. It's bad, but it is manageable.
Yeah, people figure it out. They route the ambulances elsewhere for a few hours.
But what happens when you introduce repeated, cascading disruptions across hospitals, transport sites, and utility providers simultaneously?
Oh, man.
Right, that instantly creates public panic. You get a media frenzy and intense pressure on leadership to do something, even when they don't have a clear picture of what is actually happening.
Because it creates the illusion that no one is at the wheel. It
Yeah.
makes the institution look completely incompetent, even if they are fighting a highly sophisticated, coordinated attack.
And that is the psychological payload of the swarm. It is why the source is so adamant about this. Physical security and cybersecurity can no longer be treated as two separate departments. They are one single board-level resilience challenge.
Okay, this sounds incredibly daunting. If these blended, coordinated swarm attacks are happening everywhere at once, and they are virtually impossible to entirely prevent, what do we do?
We have to plan ahead.
Right. I want to pivot to the practical side of this briefing. What are the proactive steps an organization must take before the swarm arrives? Let's get into the resilience playbook.
Well, the briefing breaks this down into very actionable strategies, starting with the technology and operations side. The foundational move is identifying your critical services.
Because you can't protect everything.
You cannot protect everything equally, so you have to map out your absolute core dependencies. This means understanding exactly how your bandwidth works, mapping out your identity management systems, and knowing the status of upstream providers.
And crucial infrastructure, like your DNS, right? The domain name system, basically the address book of the internet that routes users to your actual website. If you don't know who manages that, you are already behind.
Precisely. Good resilience planning requires deciding in advance what must continue at all costs, what can be deliberately slowed down, and how systems should fail gracefully rather than crashing all at once.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because the phrase fail gracefully is so entirely counterintuitive to how most business leaders think.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, how do you convince a high-driving executive to actively plan for their own systems to partially fail? They want to throw money at an unbreachable fear wall. Nobody wants to sit in a boardroom and say, okay, here is our plan for when we lose 50% of our operational capacity.
It is an incredibly difficult conversation to initiate, but it is the most necessary one a leader can have. You have to explain to that executive that the illusion of perfect prevention is downright dangerous.
Because the firewall will eventually fall.
Yes. If you operate under the delusion that your firewall is a magical shield, you will not have a plan for when it inevitably gets bypassed. And if you don't know exactly which core functions must stay alive under extreme pressure, you cannot prioritize defending them.
So it's about control.
Exactly. Failing gracefully means you control the degradation. You dictate the terms of the collapse, rather than letting the attacker do it.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
You are choosing which rooms to flood in order to keep the ship from sinking. You sacrifice the guest Wi-Fi and the internal analytics dashboards to keep the main transaction server alive.
That is the exact mechanism of graceful failure. Now, once you have established those priorities, you have to look at how attackers actually get in. Swarm attacks often do not bother trying to invent a complex hack to break through a firewall.
Why bother?
Right. Why spend millions developing a network exploit when you can just log in?
Yeah, the briefing points out they rely heavily on abusing valid credentials. They buy passwords on the dark web, or they compromise legitimate endpoints like a contractor's laptop. It all looks like legitimate traffic.
This is why identity and access management is paramount. Strong authentication, tightly controlled privileged access, incredibly accurate asset inventories, and rapid patching routines.
You have to know who is in your house.
You have to know exactly who and what is on your network at all times, because the swarm will use your own authorized accounts against you.
Man. There is another major operational vulnerability the briefing outlines, and it's all about operational technology, or OT.
Yeah.
This is the stuff that actually moves in the real world, right?
Yes. Operational technology encompasses the manufacturing floors, the power grids, the automated logistics sorters, the robotic arms. The source makes it very clear that business IT systems and OT systems must be separated wherever possible.
But wait, why are they connected in the first place? If connecting a robotic arm to the internet makes it vulnerable, why do companies do it?
Efficiency and data. A decade ago, the machines stamping metal parts in a factory were completely offline. But today, the CFO wants a real-time dashboard on their iPad showing production volume.
Right.
And the maintenance team wants remote alerts if a motor gets too hot. So they plug the factory floor into the corporate Wi-Fi network.
Oh, and then the attackers just ride that connection right down to the factory floor.
Exactly. Suddenly, an attacker who steals a password for the corporate email system can pivot through the network and shut down the assembly line.
So decoupling them is a massive mechanical challenge. The business has to be willing to give up some of that real-time convenience to isolate the actual physical machinery. And the briefing also stresses the need for manual fallbacks for these OT systems, right?
Yes, that is the ultimate safety net. If the automated communications are disrupted by a swarm attack, the essential operations still need a safe way to continue. You need to know how to run the factory or the hospital ward with pen and paper if necessary.
Which sounds so antiquated, but it's essential.
And those manual fallbacks have to be realistic and actually tested. Having a dusty binder on a shelf that says, in case of emergency, do manual override, is completely useless if the maintenance team has never practiced it under pressure.
Okay, so that covers the systems, the firewalls, and the physical machinery. But the source material makes a really hard pivot here, which I loved. Because once the technology starts to fail gracefully, the burden immediately shifts to the human beings who have to manage the chaos.
Yes, the human element is huge.
So let's look at the second half of this playbook, people and perception.
This is where the holistic nature of the swarm attack response really shines, because distributed systems rely entirely on physical realities. So, true resilience means securing your maintenance procedures and your logistics.
Going back to the slashed tires on the repair van, you have to be able to physically deploy people to fix the things that are broken.
You do. And it means having spare parts readily available in local caches, not just relying on global just-in-time shipping, which can easily be disrupted.
Right.
It also means having resilient field communications. If the primary corporate network goes down, or the local cell tower is jammed, how do your engineers talk to each other?
Like, do they use WhatsApp? No, wait, that might be down too.
Exactly. You might need satellite phones or entirely separate local radio networks. These physical logistics often make the difference between a minor localized hiccup and a prolonged cascading crisis.
And it requires breaking down those silos we talked about earlier. The security desk, the facilities team, and the IT engineers all need to be looking at the exact same incident picture.
Which leads us to a fascinating strategy outlined in the briefing, treating communication as a literal control set.
Yeah, I have to say, I have never thought of public relations or corporate messaging as a literal cybersecurity tool. But reading this, it hit me. In a swarm attack, confusion is just as damaging as a piece of malware.
What's fascinating here is how attackers weaponize perception. During a coordinated disruption, rumors fly. Attackers will deliberately generate fake service messages or manipulate online narratives to make a bad situation look apocalyptic.
Let's play this out because this is so interesting. Say a bank is experiencing a minor swarm attack. Their login portal is glitching. Maybe it's running a little slow. An attacker spins up a bunch of automated social media bots claiming the bank's entire database has been wiped and everyone's life savings are gone.
And what happens next? Customers panic.
Right. They flood the call centers. Millions of people try to mass withdraw funds simultaneously through the mobile app.
And that panic creates a secondary organic swarm attack. The customers themselves become a DDoS attack on the bank's infrastructure, finishing the job the hackers started.
Wow. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
That is the exact mechanism. That is why trusted public channels, pre-approved messaging templates, and a clear process for separating malicious bot activity from genuine customer demand are absolutely essential.
You have to get ahead of the story.
Managing the narrative actively prevents panic, which denies the attackers the ultimate prize they're looking for: widespread loss of control. You are patching the human vulnerability just like you patch a software vulnerability.
That is brilliant. Okay, so we've mapped our dependencies, we've secured our physical logistics, and we are managing the public narrative. How do we actually see the swarm coming? That leads to the final strategy in the playbook: unified detection.
Right. If a swarm attack relies on lots of little disruptions across different operational areas, your monitoring has to bring together signals from everywhere.
So it's like a detective standing in front of a corkboard with red string, connecting the dots between seemingly unrelated crimes across the city. You need to pull signals from the IT network, the cloud platforms, the operational technology, AD, the physical environments.
Let's look at how that actually works technically. A single digital alert about a jammed electronic security door at a regional office, well, that might look totally routine to the local facilities team.
Sure, just a busted door.
And a single alert about a failed login attempt might look totally routine to the IT team. A brief spike in cloud traffic might be ignored by the cloud engineers. If they are in silos, nobody acts.
But if they are talking to each other.
Exactly. If your triage process correlates logs across all those domains into one central dashboard, you suddenly see that the jammed door, the failed login, and the traffic spike are all happening at the exact same moment.
You see the murmuration.
You spot the parallel issues. You realize it is a coordinated campaign rather than just handling individual IT tickets in isolated departments.
So what does this all mean? When we step back and look at the entirety of this source material, The ultimate conclusion is a complete reframing of what it means to be secure. A resilient organization isn't one that avoids every failure. That is a myth.
A total myth.
Right. A truly resilient organization is one that can absorb several simultaneous localized failures without losing control of the wider situation.
The objective is no longer perfect prevention. The objective is keeping essential services running, containing the knock-on effects, and denying the attackers the wider psychological and operational impact they are aiming for.
And for you listening, whether you are managing a sprawling enterprise supply chain, leading a small remote team, or honestly just organizing your own highly connected digital life, the principle of graceful failure is a superpower.
It really is.
Knowing what is truly essential, separating it from what is just convenient, and having a realistic plan for when things inevitably go sideways is how you survive the swarm.
It requires accepting the reality of our incredibly complex, distributed world and building our defenses to match that reality, rather than clinging to the outdated idea of hiding behind a fortress wall.
But that leaves me with one final thought, something I really want you, the listener, to mull over as we wrap up this deep dive. We have established that swarm attacks rely entirely on exploiting the immense complexity and interconnectedness of our modern distributed systems, that connectivity is their fuel. So, looking long-term, will the ultimate defense eventually require us to intentionally demodernize? To survive the future, might we have to purposefully disconnect certain vital infrastructure permanently, choosing the safety of absolute isolation over the efficiency of being connected? As you watch the starlings dance in the sky, think about the delicate, dangerous balance between progress and survivability.